Hello, today is the 14th of May, 2023, and we have the pleasure to talk about a very important Japanese architect, Kunio Maekawa, born in 1905 and he died in 1986. Let's read a little bit about him. Kunio Maekawa, as you can see, born on the 14th of May, 1905, and that's the reason we talk about him today, because today it is his birthday. Was a Japanese architect and a key figure in the Japanese post-war modernism. His distinctive architectural language deftly blended together elements of traditional Japanese design and modernist tenets from Europe, drawing from early career work experiences in the offices of Le Corbusier and Antonin Raymond. He is especially known for the Tokyo Bunka Kaikan and the National Museum of Modern Art in Tokyo. We are going to see both buildings. His home, which he designed and completed in 1942, has been preserved and permanently installed in the Edo Tokyo Open Air Architectural Museum. And it is a beautiful house, and we are going to see it in detail as well. So you noticed already that he worked with Le Corbusier and Antonin Raymond, and we are going to see some pictures of him together with the great master. So this was Kunio Maekawa, an architect very appreciated by Kenneth Frampton as well, and with good reasons. Well, Kenneth Frampton also appreciates very much Antonin Raymond, for whom Kunio Maekawa worked. Here they are. On the left, Kunio Maekawa, on the right, Le Corbusier. What a pleasure, no, to have such a face-to-face encounter. I don't know where they are. Is it a subway or something? No. Anyway, here they are again with the master, drawing something, and then some Japanese younger people around him. Le Corbusier built in Japan the Museum of Modern Art, and we are going to see the building. And later on, Kunio Maekawa built an annex to that work by his mentor, if we can call Le Corbusier so, and I think we could. Again, Kunio Maekawa and Le Corbusier, and here is an emotional picture for me with Le Corbusier visiting Japan with a group of Japanese architects around him, and Kunio Maekawa is right next to him, as you can see. So I think it is another proof, this picture and other pictures that we saw, that Le Corbusier valued Kunio Maekawa. Kunio Maekawa. Now we begin with this work, the Kimura Industrial Laboratory from 1932. So we remember he was born in 1905. So at 27, he built this in Aomori. I'm nostalgic a little bit because I did once a competition entry for a museum in Aomori. Okay, 1932, Industrial Laboratory. Unfortunately, I couldn't find great pictures with this. An early work, 27 years old, Kunio Maekawa built this building. Here there are many pictures of it, but you see the resolution is unbearable, so sorry about this. I couldn't enlarge it, and here is the only acceptable resolution, meaning the size of the photograph that shows a fragment of the building. As it is, I guess, today. It looks like it's abandoned or something. Now, Hinamoto Hall, 1936. No pictures. And I don't have pictures for this town hall either. I couldn't find. The problem with, and I noticed this in the past, pictures with works by Japanese architects often are of two different kinds. Either very small resolution, where you can barely see anything, or very large resolution, which floods. I mean, which freeze the you know, the inadequate computers or laptops. And I have an old laptop, and I struggled with the large size pictures. And I also struggle with the ones with a very small size, you know, or small resolution. But now we arrive at this magnificent work by him, and it's truly a beautiful house he built for himself in 1942. So he was 37 years old when he built this house for himself. It's a house which is, you know, Japanese, which is, so to speak, traditional, but it's also modern. And he was able to unite the past with the present, his present, but also our present, because this is not a house that, you know, looks inadequate for our time. No, I wouldn't say so. I believe that Charles Baudelaire, the great French poet, in the 19th century, had a very astute observation about the two halves of art. And I include architecture here too. Baudelaire said, art has two halves. One half is about the eternal, the immutable, the permanent, and the other half is about the transitory, the circumstantial, the changing. So you have to have both. And I think this building has both. It has the so-called eternal, immutable, permanent side relating to the tradition of Japan, but it also has novelty relating to, you know, the circumstantial, the modernity that Maekawa was, you know, already immersed in. And I read that while most Japanese architects of his time looked for inspiration towards the Bauhaus, meaning towards Germany, he was looking for inspiration towards France, meaning towards Le Corbusier. A very fine house and kept very well. I also read that Kunio Maekawa, as opposed to other architects, built very, built very well. You know, his houses are in very good condition because he paid. He was very careful to build them according to the rules, so to speak. And you can see here in his own house. So this is an almost 100 years old house, and it's in perfect shape, perfectly symmetrical, but it's not rigid. This is also a paradox because, as Bruno Cevi said, modernity should avoid by all means symmetry. But we see here Kunio Maekawa, who was one of the most important Japanese architects who brought modernity to Japan, built this house perfectly symmetrical for himself. Is it rigid? I don't think it is rigid in the sense of being, oppressively symmetrical. No, it's not. It is symmetrical, but it's not rigid. A fine articulation of everything here. The small and the large, you know, and it's a quintessential house. And yet, it's not a crashing house. It's not. It's rather small. It's not a very big house with a very pleasant interior. Kunio Maekawa. But this is a section through the building, probably a reproduction of an original drawing. We are going to see another one with also the plans of the house. Kunio Maekawa. Why is it that the Japanese are so formidable in the field of architecture? Because they are. Of all countries in the world, they have the largest number of Pritzker prizes. And even now they move the world of architecture. Why? Well, they work very hard, but it's not just that. It's their ability to absorb influences from other parts and still remain rooted in their own culture, and a great sense of design and measure and the love for nature. And so, of course, not all architecture is superlative, but in some examples, and it has plenty of examples, Japan is showing us the way. No wonder that very important European or North American architects love Japan, like Frank Lloyd Wright and Bruno Taut, and there are others. It's they are an inspiration. Kunio Maekawa. But also what is perhaps a little bit strange is that actually one of the two mentors of Kunio Maekawa was a Czech architect, and that is Antonin Raymond, who lived and worked in Japan, first as a consul of Czechoslovakia in Japan, and then as an architect. He was trained as an architect. And Kunio Maekawa worked in the office of Antonin Raymond and was influenced by Antonin Raymond. I love this house. I mean, you look at this picture, it's beautiful as a photograph, but it's a photograph of a beautiful house. Now, is this the radiator here? It is at the bottom. I mean, you're not going to see very often something like this where the radiator is showing its face, so to speak, towards the outside. But it's perfectly at home with everything else. Great house and great trees. And here is the plan of the house. In a way, a very predictable plan. What is less predictable and rather unexpected is this door, which opens in a way which is not advisable, I mean, most architects would open this door the other way. Interesting. I hope that the drawing is accurate. Understood he came from a well-to-do family, and this did matter. Apparently, he found a job with Le Corbusier thanks to through the intervention of one of his uncles who worked with a diplomatic mission in France. Great house. Bravo, Kunio Maekawa. Now, a bank from 1952, so from 1942, when he built his own house, and to 1952, there were 10 years. But during those 10 years, a number of years were dedicated to destruction, and that is the Second World War, which was deadly for the world in general and for Japan in particular as well. So, in 1952, he got this commission to build a bank in Tokyo, and here it is. And you know, it kind of shows its age. Maybe it's not a building that makes it to the histories of architecture, but he built it in 1952 when Japan was making great efforts to emerge from the ashes of the bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, from losing the war. And I'm sure, I mean, it was a heroic period in the life of this great nation, Japan. But they managed to come back with great force, not just in architecture, but in economy and in all fields. Kanagawa Prefectural Library and Music Hall in Yokohama from 1954. Kunio Maekawa. His architecture is not really spectacular. It takes some attention to notice its quality, and this is a virtue that doesn't need superficial effects in order to be meaningful. So his architecture is complex. Maybe that's the reason why, as I read, he was not as advertised like, for example, Kenzo Tange and the Metabolists. The International House of Japan in Tokyo, he worked with another important architect, Shunzo Sakakura. I don't know about Shunzo Yoshimura. Anyway, Japan has so many good architects, and Kunio Maekawa, in this case, he worked with these two other architects from 1955. This is the building, the Tokyo International, the International House of Japan. As you can see, it's modernity, but it's not a strident modernity. He also employed concrete, like Japan for a good number of years was one of the great consumers of concrete in architecture, and brutalist buildings, as they are called today, were very common in Japan. Himself, Kunio Maekawa, used concrete, but later on he began to use brick, and so he kind of left that brutalist period behind. So this is the plan of this international school. Yesterday I commented on the glass parapets of Tadao Ando in Venice, but here we see a glass parapet, but we also see the wooden handrail, and that is a plus in my opinion. It's not just glass left by itself, but you also have the handrail that, and later on we are going to see a detail of a wooden handrail that I don't know, impressed me. Tokyo City to demolish Kunio Maekawa design clubhouse. This, searching for material for the presentation, I came across this announcement, and this is the house, a clubhouse that Tokyo decided to demolish. Too bad. What can we say? Too bad. Demolitions are certainly not sustainable. In general, we should abstain from demolishing, what we built. Okayama Prefectural Office, 1955, a fine office building, so different from North American, office buildings. And look here, the parapets here, they are very sensitively done and almost with something so-called traditional. And also the rhythmicity of the windows, the verticality of the windows. Yes, we have horizontal bands of windows, but the windows are actually vertical. I like this building. I don't usually fall in love with office buildings, but I think this is a good building by Kunio Maekawa. Fukushima Education Center in Fukushima, 1956. Look, when he felt like being adventurous, he was adventurous, meaning formally in the field of form. Why not? That's how the building looks like today. When was it built? 1956. So almost 70 years ago. Now we are going to see a remarkable housing complex, block of flats, 1959. So, more than 60 years old. I truly like this, and I wish I had more time to study it carefully, but I invite anyone who is interested in Kunio Maekawa to search for this particular work, because it is a work which, okay, maybe you could say shows some influence coming from L'Unité d'Habitation by Le Corbusier, but it's different, it's unique, and it's structurally very, very convincing, and aesthetically equally so. So it's a big building, it's imposing, it's monumental, but it's crafted also at the level of small elements very well. And I would say it's very Japanese. I don't ask me to to explain. It's a feeling I have. It's very Japanese, although it is inspired by l'unité d'habitation. As you can see, the Japanese are not shy to dry the carpets and so on the balconies, or even outside in front of the building. But look at the section of the building. We are going to see another image or two with you'll understand better the structure. This kind of mega building for housing. Look, this is a fragment of the house with an exterior corridor from which you can access the apartments. And look at the structure. It's even graphically convincing and pleasing. I always like this, to have exterior corridors from which you access the apartments, because you have cross ventilation in the apartment, and it's very easy to, create a very functional apartment, having the chance to enter from one side and then to have, access to the other side of the building, a double orientation. I actually built such a building myself in a city in Romania. Much smaller than this one, of course. Now here we see concrete, exposed concrete, very heroically, and I like it. I like concrete. At that time, people didn't care about pollution or things like this, like climate change and so on. But today, it's a different story. Today, we should abstain from using concrete as much as possible. But what I like here is that you see the structure, you see the exposed concrete, very vigorous, and the scale. I mean, it's very vigorous. But then within, framed by this heroic concrete structure, we have windows that remind one of Japanese traditional architecture, to an extent even of his own house. And so I think it's a marvelous example of uniting an audacious modernity with a sensitivity that didn't neglect, didn't forget what we call the past. brought us. A very unusual block of flats, because it is, yes, it's clearly a mega social machine, but somehow you have the feeling that the individual units are also honored. So, no, you know, it's not a depersonalizing building. It's a personalized building where each unit, although he employs identical elements, but because of this subtle clin d'oeil towards the past, the building, although, as I said, audaciously modern, is not divorced. It's not totally divorced from the past. Very nice work. Now another one from 1959, Setagaya Community Center in Tokyo. Here we see the heroism of you know, exposed concrete at its most asserting. This is Japan around that time. Many architects employed, you know, large surfaces of exposed concrete, and they did it with a pathos that was, you know, was and is impressive. Maybe that's why. I mean, they contributed to the you know, the re-emergence of brutalism with a publication called SOS Brutalismus, and you know, exhibitions, publication in the recent years. Unfortunately, as I said, concrete is a very significant polluter of the world, and we have to be very, very careful. Well, what is nice about the concrete, though, although Frank Lloyd Wright didn't like concrete and he called it a conglomerate, is that and actually I admire more this treatment or lack of treatment of the concrete, this exposed concrete, which is not polished, like in the case of Tadao Ando. I think concrete is at its best when it shows even its imperfections, when it is raw. If it is polished, it's almost, I don't know, inappropriate. Maybe the word is not quite the best that I found, but well, this is my preference for a raw expression of concrete. And look at this handrail. I left it like this enlarged because I don't know, it moves me to see this is an architecture without finishes, you know. It's not, I mean, it's not hiding. It's not hiding, you know. The wood is wood, concrete is concrete, and you see it. It's not, it's exposed. There is a level of sincerity that I admire here. I wish we'd have the courage to build it this way again. Not to be afraid of rawness. As Zaha Hadid said, her desideratum was, she declared, to build a raw, earthy, and vital architecture. Maybe sometimes buildings, or maybe often buildings, have a level of vitality, but they are certainly not raw and they are not earthy. But here we do see earthiness, and in some other works we also see earthiness. What I'm saying, we see rawness, and also in some other works earthiness. The Kyoto Kaikan in Kyoto, I forgot what this means actually, Kaikan. Sorry about this. I thought my memory was better, but it's not. Anyway, this is in Kyoto. Maybe some kind of a conference hall, or I don't know. Tokyo Bunka Kaikan, again Kaikan. Now I think this is Opera House. Let's see. Yeah, Opera House, but maybe with a hybrid function. This one in Tokyo from 1961. is a famous one. As you can see, pretty large. So I guess that's what it means, Kaikan, Bunka Kaikan, Tokyo Bunka Kaikan, 1961 in Tokyo. It's not overwhelming, and it doesn't have a, you know, an oppressive verticality at all. It's rather horizontal, although he built also something vertical, and we are going to see later. It's also interesting what Toyo Ito said about Kunio Maekawa. And a little bit later on, we are going to read what he had to say about Kunio Maekawa. Well, what actually he said was that Kunio Maekawa was the first and the last Japanese architect who kind of avoided the Japanese essentialism. That's what Toyo Ito said. Another good building by Kunio Maekawa in Tokyo. And I love I mean, I don't know, it's almost surprising, this tree now in front of an opera house in a major city of the world, Tokyo. And maybe the love for nature that the Japanese have, but also the way, this tree is left there with all its paradigmatic power and its, beautiful primitivism. If I am to, conclude that, the tree or a tree can be primitive, it's the power of nature. It's the power of nature, robust, and then the building behind it is as it is. It's not overwhelming the tree, and that's an excellent thing. That's not the kind of architecture. Try to compare, for example, this building with the Opera in Paris by Charles Garnier. You can't. There are two different sensibilities. I mean, I know that this is what the building is, but when I look at the pictures, I wouldn't imagine that this is, an opera house. It could be almost anything else, but not an opera house. And yet, look, the interior. Very interesting architect, Kunio Maekawa. A little bit difficult and complex. Because of his complexity, he deserves more attention and more study. And I would try for the next time when I pay homage to him to study him a little more. Hayashibara Museum of Art in Okayama, 1964. Here we see, the traditionally, no, I shouldn't say so, because he was not a traditionalist. But this kind of building you wouldn't expect from an architect who worked for and with Le Corbusier for a number of years, and who promoted himself modernity in Japan. But this building is, is almost anonymously traditional. You wouldn't expect, to be done by a famous modern architect. This building. It shows how complex and versatile Kunio Maekawa was. Hayashibara Museum of Art, Kunio Maekawa. Now, the Saitama Cultural Center, 1966, someone wrote, I found an article about this building, a sense of proportion, discretion, and durability, visiting Kunio Maekawa Saitama Prefectural Museum. So again, proportion, discretion, and durability. This is the website where I read about it and I took some pictures from. That person wrote, Marco Capitanio, about him, about this work. This is an issue of the Japan Architect, celebrated architecture magazine dedicated to Kunio Maekawa, and with a picture of this particular work. Now look at this, and I almost wish it was raining here. I mean, I like this. Look at the pavement. Look at the water accumulated on the pavement. Look at the grass. Look at the bushes. Look at the trees. And I noticed that in his later works, he brought nature in more and more. And he began to employ bricks, like here. But it's beautiful. Now you also have the chromatics, that the dialectics between, you know, reddishness or redness, you know, that the brick has, although it is nuanced here. And the green of the trees, of nature, of grass, of bushes, of trees. Beautiful. It's beautiful. I'm sure Alvarado would have loved it too. And this is the model. So we see asymmetry here, but we saw his own house, which was perfectly symmetrical. A very fine museum. And the employment of the materials is exquisite, you know, using bricks outside of the walls, but also on the horizontal surfaces. Very, very nice. Proportion, discretion, and durability. And here is the quotation from Toyo Ito that I mentioned. Maekawa was our first and last free, meaning ideologically independent architect, who till the end rejected returning to only Japanese essentialism. In other words, his palette, his repertoire was larger and beyond what Toyo Ito calls Japanese essentialism. Now we see another intriguing work, this very famous world exhibition, World Expo in 1970 in Osaka, where the metabolists, you know, had very extravagant buildings built, but he built a very modest building. And, you know, I understand why he was, you know, not so much advertised as some other architects. Because this building in 1970 at a very spectacular world exhibition where architects like Kenzo Tange and Kiyonori Kikutake and Arata Isozaki contributed significantly and with eye-catching, you know, productions, Kunio Maekawa was rather modest and subdued. And you are going to see the building. This is the building. It's a building which, you know, doesn't attract attention. In what way is the, because it's a steel pavilion. It's this reddish part here, you know, that is, you know, almost a reference to Miss van der Rohe, or to a certain kind of steel architecture that was promoted and built all over the world, or especially the United States. Is this part that stands out as some kind of, you know, advertising for the function of the building, that is the steel pavilion. Otherwise, the pavilion is almost not interesting. But the duality of the building makes it interesting. I don't know what this is, and I don't know what, if he did it. It's probably just you know, some kind of enclosure or some kind of an open ceiling meaning no ceiling pavilion made of steel. And here we see steel indeed, but the building is not made of steel. And yes, the equipment inside the building is steel through and through, but the architecture is very almost common, not spectacular. Interesting work. 1974 Tokyo Marine and Fire Insurance Building. This is a tall building. It's the only one that I found by him that was tall. 1974. The Marine and Fire Insurance Building in Tokyo. But he uses brick here again. It's a fine building. It's a very fine building. Sorry about the, the authorship of this photograph, which bothers me. I don't know why people do this, to destroy great pictures just because they want to, make it so obvious that someone, a certain someone, was the author. The Japanese flag, the redness of the Japanese flag, perhaps a symbol of Amaterasu, the sun goddess, a primordial goddess in Japan, Amaterasu. And it's interesting that, in Europe, the sun is a masculine deity, but in Japan, it's a feminine deity, and that is Amaterasu. And we see brick, the red brick. Very nice work. Bravo, Maekawa. Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum. It's a work from 1975. Also, as you can see, later in his later years, he almost continuously employed bricks. Some people thought that this was rather European kind of aesthetical statement, but I think his buildings are still Japanese. And I like the fact that his architecture is not ostentatious. It's rather reticent. Yes, it's well executed. Yes, it is modern, but it's not ostentatious. Kunio Maekawa. Kumamoto Prefecture Museum of Art in Kumamoto, 1976. Now, this picture here is a little bit misleading because there are other pictures of this museum which are different. This one has a certain level of monumentality, but you see the walls do have graphics, do have ornament. The surface is not just left plain or blank. It has a playful geometry on it, which is ornamental. And then the great trees of Japan are here also, and we are going to see. Well, as I said, I had problem like this picture. I couldn't find in a large resolution, and I would have liked to see it bigger, but I can't. This one is in black and white. But again, I like the use of the brick for the the horizontal surfaces. And now images of the building that is again in a harmonious dialogue with nature, with the green. And this is the plan of the museum. It's a perfect equilibrium between clay and plant material, if I am to call them so, the trees and the bushes and so on. And you have the bricks, and the bricks are clay, and then the color of that material, and then the color of the foliage of the trees, and they are in good equilibrium. But they both belong to the earth, because the bricks also belong to the earth. So he left behind that concrete period, and became more nuanced, softer in a way. The Museum of East Asian Art, but in Köln, in Germany, Cologne, 1977. It's clear we are in Germany. We see here two Volkswagens, Beetle, a great car. But the museum, again, is not extravagant, as we are accustomed these days to see very extravagant, sometimes even crazy buildings. No, Maekawa had a sense of measure. Well, the artworks are something else. He didn't create the artworks, but the building is reticent. An interesting courtyard. So we are in Germany, in Köln, a sand garden. The Museum of Asian Art. Now, Fukuoka Art Museum, another art museum, 1979. Again, his buildings are not surprising, but if you dwell on them a little bit and meditate on them, they are probably rich sources of inspiration. And increasingly, I see the harmonious relationship between building and nature. The National Museum of Western Art Annex in Tokyo, 1979. The National Museum of Western Art was built by Le Corbusier, but Kunio Maekawa built the annex. And I think he contributed also, or assisted Le Corbusier. I'm not sure about it, but since he worked together with Le Corbusier for a number of years, he probably was involved also in the process of building the building by Le Corbusier, the museum, the National Museum of Western Art. This is the museum built by Le Corbusier, and Kunio Maekawa built next to it an annex for the same function, for the same building. So again, this is by Le Corbusier, and this is by Kunio Maekawa. And I admire him for the fact that he was not intimidated by the work of Le Corbusier, and he created an architecture that was his, and in some good respects, very different from the architecture of Le Corbusier. We see again and again the value placed on the landscape, on the gardening, on nature. Concrete is used only sporadically, like these parapets here, and this is again, it's gone, that brutalismus of earlier years. The next two pictures are taken from a magazine. I mean, the last two pictures, this one and this one. And now we go to the Miyagi Museum of Art in Sendai in 1981. We are approaching the end of this presentation. We see again, you know, the immersion of the building into the landscape, the proximity of nature, the affection for nature, without having the building, you know, renounce completely to its own characteristics. But this dialogue between nature and building is, I think, distinctive in his later years. If you would have built this building, let's say 30, 40 years later, this would have been probably exposed concrete, raw concrete. Well, it's not like this any longer. This is from 1981. Brick again, beautifully, you know, put to work. A museum is a museum. The interior is often rather predictable because the interest is of the artworks that are displayed on the walls. But what is unusual here is that the walls are not white. And that's a good thing, I think. Kumamoto Prefectural Theatre in Kumamoto, 1982. Again, it shows this work, the value he placed on the horizontal surfaces. They have an ornamental design. He doesn't just treat the surfaces we walk on without aesthetical considerations. It's you know, an amphitheater inside the building, and the section, I have another section, if I'm not mistaken, schematic as it is and low resolution. I try to explain what happens, that some pictures you know, coming from Japan are either very small resolution or very large. Like this one again is, I wish it was bigger, but anyway, you can still have an idea about, you know, how he conceived this large, you know, auditorium inside the building. But this is surprising, even for buildings that have you know, large volumes or large spaces. The feeling you have outside of the building is that they are rather discrete buildings, you know, 1, 2 floors. The trees are taller than the building. You even wonder, where is this space actually? You know, it exists, but it's kind of hidden, since such pictures can be taken from the building. I mean, how many buildings today in the world are lower in height than the height of the trees? Not many. And we are talking about, you know, Japan, a very, you know, developed country and very capable of building high. Inside, he has this space, which is very interesting and, you know, aesthetically, you know, enticing. But I need to study the building more to understand how come such a big volume is able to be hidden somehow. I mean, it's hidden in some parts of the building and by some parts of the building, and many pictures are like this, as I said. You will say this is not the same building, but it is. That's it. So let's wish happy birthday to Kunio Maekawa, and let's hope the next time I'll have the chance to talk about him, we'll learn more things about this remarkable Japanese architect. Thank you.